pointed out, you can enter questions in the chat, and we can also wait till the end, and there'll be plenty of time for you to have questions. So I will turn this over now to Zenaido Quintana.
Well, thank you so much, Kay. And I want to, first of all, thank all of you for being in this inaugural transmission and this program that I hope we will be expanding on pretty rapidly. I know that many of you have been longtime members of Freethought Arizona and have gotten used to the kind of programming that they've put forth that seeks to provide information that is interesting and thoughtful, and primarily focused on free thought and humanistic kind of topics. That is something, obviously, that we don't want to abandon. We want to build upon. And so let me just briefly talk about how I happened to get involved on this in this particular activity. I was one of the founders of Secular AZ, and let me just clarify real quickly. Secular AZ consists of two separate entities. One is a 501c4, Secular Coalition for Arizona. That coalition essentially is a coalition indeed. At the moment, there are 22 members, of which Freethought Arizona is one of the charter members. In fact, we started with 12, and Freethought Arizona was one. And the primary reason for pulling that organization together, is 10 years ago now, was so that we could raise money to hire a lobbyist. Initially, we tried to lobby as part-time amateurs, and we got our name in the paper, we made a little bit of noise, and so on and so forth, but we were completely ineffective as lobbyists because we didn't know what we were doing. We had not established relationships, so it didn't take long. It took exactly one legislative session for us to say, we either got to get serious about this or we got to fold up our tents. So we decided to get serious, and we went around the state talking to everyone we knew who might support us. And happily, Freethought Arizona was one of the two organizations, along with the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix, that actually donated substantial funds for us to get off the ground. There were in the beginning essentially three organizations that donated to our founding. One was Freethought Arizona, Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix, and the other group consisted of the board of directors that we pulled together to start up Secular Coalition. We hired a lobbyist with the funding. Oh, by the way, we also were able to get significant funding from a number of generous individuals, most of them in Phoenix and in Tucson. So in those two localities, we found a few individuals that had the capacity to join us and the interest in our success as a lobbying group. At the time, and until this very moment, Secular Coalition for Arizona is the only state-based lobbying organization that works full-time with a professional lobbyist, lobbying the state organizations. We started out as an affiliate of Secular Coalition for America. They had plans to launch, they called it their 50-state strategy, to launch chapters in all 50 states. We became the first, but we signed on not as a chapter, but as an affiliate. For those of you who are not familiar with the distinction, an affiliate essentially is standalone. We have never received any funding from the national organization, and we have never sent any funding to the national organization as a group. Some of us individually have contributed, but as a group, we have not. We have been completely independent. At the time that we founded Secular Coalition for Arizona, I had just started to serve on the board of the ACLU of Arizona. A couple years later, I was elected its president. And one of the things I noticed is that a lot of the challenges that we faced in Secular Coalition were the same ones that ACLU has faced in the past. So I pretty quickly determined to use the ACLU model as a way to rapidly get us, if you will, up the ladder of learning so that we could become an effective organization and serve the community of initially the 12 groups that had joined up with us. So that started off very well. Like I said, we hired a lobbyist. We started making inroads and started raising money in small and bigger amounts. And a couple of years into the mission, we changed the lobbyist in order to get one who had substantially more experience and had already pre-established relationships at the legislature. Many of you know our lobbyist that has been our lobbyist now for almost 8 years, and that's Tori Roberg. She started out as Tori Anderson, and she got divorced. So Tori Roberg serves as our Director of Government Affairs and effectively our lobbyist. And as I said, she had pre-established relationships. And those of you who have met Tori or know Tori know that she's a very likable person. She's very bright, very energetic, kind of petite. She was also a triathlete, so she's very athletic. Anyway, Tori was the consummate professional, and she set about establishing relationships. The beauty of Tori is that she had already, as I mentioned, had pre-established relationships. People knew her as a lobbyist for children's organizations, children's nonprofits, and labor union nonprofits, and so on. So they had an impression of her as being a pretty regular person. Well, when she decided to take on Secular Coalition, these are people who truly had not really engaged the meaning of the term secular. And many of them were shocked. It says, what is this? You're taking up with all these atheists and so on. And indeed, for the first year or so that she was involved, we pretty much were in the mold that how many of you are from, if you can raise your hand, those of you that I can see, some of you have muted out your visual. How many of you know who the Center for Arizona Policy is? Okay, Center for Arizona Policy is a lobbying organization for the evangelical Christian community. It has a very substantial amount of money that comes from the coffers of congregations around the state, evangelical congregations around the state. And they've got, I don't know, maybe like 15 or 20 people on their staff. They got a couple $1 million budget. And they have been superbly effective in passing legislation over the years, the last 10, 15 years in the state of Arizona. And a lot of the more offensive pieces of legislation that we are now saddled with have been because of their initiatives. In the beginning, they tried to marginalize us, as they called us atheists and gays. That's who we essentially were supposed to represent. So we decided that we wanted to cast ourselves as, first of all, in the traditional sense of what secular meant, which is a government free of religious influence. And that's the central meaning of secular, and the one that we have stuck with, and essentially not to be champions of disbelief or non-belief. We characterized them that is the Center for Arizona Policy, as being essentially extremists and radicals that represented a very small slice of the religious community, whereas Secular AZ, Secular Coalition, represented the interest of all Arizonans. So we would not be marginalized. And as a consequence, we found that when we very openly expressed that posture, we started getting interest, much more interest from allies like the LBGT community and Planned Parenthood. ACLU was a given because I was by that time the president of the ACLU, and I brought them along, and their support was very valuable to us. So we were able to get this cadre of allies and more interest from the legislators in essentially supporting the things that we favored. So over the years, we have built on that, and we have necessarily built on it in a defensive posture. That is to say, because of the way lawmaking works, if your supporters are in the minority in any of the houses of the legislature, your initiatives do not get heard. Your bills do not get heard in committee. They don't even get introduced. They get sidetracked immediately. So we have to, if we're going to succeed, we have to do it in a defensive posture. And that posture was essentially the posture of derailing bad bills. And I think there was a movie not long ago called Kill Bill. And Tori Roberg got the nickname of Kill Bill because that was her specialty. Her specialty was finding out how to kill bills. In fact, one of the things I like to tell people is Simon and Garfunkel said there were 50 ways to leave your lover, but Tori Roberg knew more than 50 ways on how to kill bills. So we were able to get many of these obnoxious bills killed in a variety of ways. Or in some cases, when we couldn't get them outright killed, she was able to mitigate their impact so that it was far less effective in impinging on people's rights. So Secular Coalition was established then with Tori about 7 or 8 years ago now as our lobbyist, and we have been going from strength to strength. One of the measures of that, by the way, is that every year, in order to continue to foster and cement good relationships with our legislators, we give out what we call Secular Star Awards. These are awards that we give to our legislative supporters who go above and beyond just voting in favor of our initiatives or voting the way we want them to vote and do something else. One of the things they've done, for example, is given secular invocations in front of the legislature or sponsored bills or done something that introduced bills when we have been able to. So they've done several things in our favor. And so we give them these stars. We have a rating system. And if you go to our website, as Kay mentioned, is secularaz.org, there is now I think it's a scorecard that we published recently on these legislators to give our constituents some information on who supports secular causes. So we give these secular stars. In the beginning, we had one. We had one secular star who happened to be the fellow who gave the very first secular invocation in the country. This is about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. And it made the news. It made the news incredibly. And so it was Juan Mendez, and I think most of you probably heard of him. And in the last 2 years now, this is fast forward about 8 years, we have had to limit the number of secular stars we give to 10 because otherwise it gets out of hand. But we've had as many as about 14 or 15 legislators now who have been supporting our program pretty intensively. So we have several measures of the success of our program. And so, and we've done it all in the defense mode. A couple of days ago, we had our Secular Star celebration just like this online. And I asked them the question, you have gotten extremely adept and effective at working in defense. When you switch to offense, what are your priorities? What are you going to put forth? And it was interesting to hear them, but they're all the stuff that almost every person who is progressive or secular appreciates. You know, the elimination of the discriminatory stuff that we've been getting steadily. We've had a steady diet of issues associated with education, women's health, women's reproductive health care, and so on. So all of those issues that secular folks support are right on the top of their list. And I was really gratified because several of them spoke very highly of the support they had gotten from Secular Coalition. And one of the things I was going to say, I mentioned that we are unique in being the only state that has an organization like Secular AZ working full-time during the legislative session. There's one other thing we did that's absolutely unique. About 5 years ago maybe now, Tori called me up kind of in a panic. And she says, you know, the speaker just introduced the second Bible study class, the second weekly Bible study class for the legislators. What can we do about this? Well, I called Alessandra. Her name was Soler then, now it's Alessandra Navidad. She remarried, who was the executive director of the ACLU, and I discussed it with her. And essentially what she told me is, you know, we could do a couple of things, but it'll take forever, and we're not going to get much done. So I called Tori back and I said, well, you know, this probably won't work, but why don't you see if we can do this on equity grounds, ask them if they'll let us do a secular studies program. So she and Senator, at that time it was Representative Juan Mendez, they actually applied for that and it was approved. We are the only legislature in the country that every week during the legislative session has a secular studies program. So we get the legislators for the lunch hour. We bring in speakers to talk about secular topics. Not necessarily all church-state separation stuff. We deal with immigration, we deal with poverty, we deal with homelessness, we deal with everything along with the regular diet of women's reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights and so on. So every week, we essentially make about a 20-minute, 25-minute presentation and then have the legislators, and by the way, we invite both parties. Far more Democrats come to them than Republicans. And we've been doing this now for about 5 years. The most gratifying thing to me is to hear the 10 secular stars say to us that that program is the most important thing that they get from anybody outside the legislature, at the legislature, in terms of giving them an opportunity to really examine issues in any kind of depth, because they have so much to consider, and frankly, limited expertise on the part of any one of them to be able to digest much of anything. And the speakers we bring in are topic experts, so they know what they're talking about. And when we ask them all, what would you like us to make sure we don't lose? That's it. Do not give up on the secular studies program. It's very critical to us. Unique in the country. No one else does it other than Secular Coalition for Arizona. The cost of this to us is the cost of about 3 or 4 dozen tacos that we feed the legislature every week, once a week. So Tori is also beloved of all the taco vendors around the Capitol who deliver for these presentations that we have. So let me talk a little bit about the other half of the secular AZ, which is secular communities. Secular Communities is a 501c3 organization, and it was founded initially to provide a means of attracting tax-deductible donations in support of Secular Coalition. So that was its primary reason for putting it together. And it's been in place now, I think, for about 6 years. And after a year or two, we decided, well, now that we have this 501c3, we can use it for a lot more stuff. And one of the things that became obvious to us is the education charter and communications charter that are associated with a C3 is something that we should build on. And at that point, we started reaching out to all of our constituents in our coalition to see what kind of help they needed and to provide some cross-pollination, if you will, of best practices that they all had in terms of the meetings they were conducting. And in due course, we found that several of these organizations needed real existential kind of help. I took over as president of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, the Greater Phoenix chapter, and Freedom from Religion Foundation, the Valley of the Sun chapter. Now, these Arizona chapters of these two national organizations had been founded by a good friend of mine, a woman named Ann Mardick. Some of you may remember Ann Mardick from some of those activities. Ann Mardick sadly died a little over 2 years ago. She had suffered from rheumatoid arthritis. And truth be told, the last couple of years of her life, she had a struggle trying to keep those organizations afloat. So Secular Coalition for Arizona, or Secular AZ, in this particular case actually was Secular Communities, decided to step in and do what we could to safeguard the viability of these two organizations. Now, why would we do that? Well, obviously, there are constituents to whom the philosophies of each of these organizations are very important. They're quite different. Americans United for the Separation of Church and State essentially is an organization that builds bridges with secular people of faith. A lot of them in the interfaith community, people who are essentially not involved in the evangelical movement, who are mostly involved in these kinds of organizations, these kinds of congregations. A lot of other denominations, Jewish people, Muslims, and various other faiths that are not in the mainstream of the evangelical movement that is the most aggressive in terms of asserting their beliefs into public policies. So these groups have been part of Americans United. That was an important thing to preserve. And so we got involved in that. Had one other thing that was very valuable. They had national organizations with strong legal teams. So we kept those things afloat. In fact, just a couple of months ago, I turned over the presidency of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, the Greater Phoenix chapter, to my associate, Joe Blankenship, who is now the president and is setting forth a very aggressive program of continuing growth. I have identified someone to take over the presidency of Freedom from Religion Foundation, the Valley of the Sun chapter, to do the same thing. Now, that organization is closer to the other side of the spectrum. They are not, they don't promote affinity with religion, if you will. They are very much non-believers, and they promote non-belief, and they also expose malfeasance and misfeasance among the clergy. So one part of their charter is to remove the moral authority that many people, many leaders of faith uh, take on. Our society has given it to them, and many of them use it very effectively. And so they are very aggressive at exposing wrongdoing on the part of the clergy. That's part of their charter. So we've got these two very broad organizations. Each of them goes after a different constituency, but each of them tied to a national group that has a very strong legal presence. 3 years ago, Secular Communities launched a legal team. We attracted to our board a woman who many of you may know, Diane Post, who was previously the legal director of the NAACP in Arizona. Diane is a member of our board, and I asked her to form a legal panel, and I got a couple of more board members. I got one of the lead lawyers from the ACLU to join our board. The fellow who is now, some of you may have heard of him, you may have met him, Luke Douglas, who is the executive director of the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix and also a lawyer. He has joined our board. And this team of legal people now are responding to complaints, filing demand letters, and doing everything necessary to essentially have a legal initiative in fact, a legal offensive, I might even say, in behalf of Secular AC. Their big program right now, they sent out all these letters to all these school districts in the state of Arizona requesting information on their curriculum so that they could pick through it and find out who was in compliance and who wasn't not with regard to church-state separation issues. They then sent demand letters, cease and desist letters, to those that they felt were not in compliance. We were gratified. At least a third of the people whom we initially contacted who were not in compliance immediately saluted and said, "We're sorry, we didn't know that we were not in compliance," and stopped what they were doing. And all for the price of several postage stamps and a little bit of time, this legal team that operates out of Secular Communities. And we now have a growing list of compliance issues that we have essentially brought on with regard to many of the municipalities and many of the agencies. Fire department in Winslow, in Marana, we did something with the school district there. We're currently working on some things in Benson. So we've got a number of places and cases around the state where we are very actively pursuing legal action. But we have 4 volunteer lawyers on our staff. But we also have Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, the ACLU, the FH, all these organizations at the national level who respond more enthusiastically and more helpfully to people who have some lawyers on the ground that can help them with some of that spade work. So that is what Secular Communities is doing to make certain that these organizations at the national level are willing and ready to support our cases here in the state. Obviously, we also have an ongoing partnership with the local ACLU community. I remain close to them. I should make one correction, Kay, in your introduction. I just went off of that board in March. I was starting to get too many balls in the air, so, so I did go off that board in March. But like I said, I remain very close to those people, and have at least one of them on the board of Secular AZ at the moment. So that's Secular AZ. That's what it consists of. And in that same spirit, Jerry Karchis, the previous president of Freethought, Arizona, who of course had been a friend now for several years and supporter for several years, he asked me a couple of years ago for some help in transitioning the leadership of Freethought, Arizona, from the old board, the founders, to a new board. And at that time, I tried to find him a new president, and I was not successful. I was a little bit too tied up myself, but I was not successful. And so a little more time went on, and he called me again and said, "Look, we're all getting ready to retire. There's a few people who may be interested in carrying on, but can you come down and talk to us?" So last year I came down and talked to Freethought again, and at that point, the new group had actually come together and wanted to form a new board and carry on the way they had been historically. And so they've been doing that now for a few months. When I heard from Kay again and Lyman, who had been elected president from this interim board, Lyman Grover, some of you may know him, and of course Kay Lehman, who's with us now. And they asked again if we could help. They had now been dealt a couple of additional blows. Their traditional meeting place had been closed down for renovations, and they were having to scamper around looking for a new one. And once COVID started setting in, it was obvious they could not continue with the kind of meetings they had in the past. So by then, Sector Coalition had started to launch its own Zoom meeting program. And so I came down, and I didn't come down. Actually, we met virtually. And in those meetings, we agreed that I would get involved more directly in helping Freethought Arizona launch their program and connect it to the rest of the state so that we could continue to reinforce each other going forward. So that's kind of the history of my involvement. Let me spend just a couple of minutes talking about a vision, because I think it's important for those of you who have been members to understand why it is important for you to continue to participate and support this organization here in Tucson. Number one, we are going to launch. We have launched this. This is our first event, actually, of a public nature, and we are already, as Kay mentioned, we are already scheduling other presentations. Now, this tool that we have now, that we've made a virtue out of this necessity in communicating with you, has a lot of possibilities. Number one, we can aim it in very many different directions. It's pretty easy to schedule speakers to appeal to different groups, and maybe to have multiple series, one that may appeal to some traditional membership and another group that may appeal to a new group that may help it grow with other demographics. At the moment, there's also other social upheavals, as you all know, with the Black Lives Matter movement. I think the Black Lives Matter movement has kind of forced America to take a hard look at the hardships that the system that we have maintained over the years have brought on our Black citizens, and for that matter, citizens of color across the board. There has been a disproportionate amount of discrimination and even deprivation of some of those people, and we are now having all our consciousness raised. What I've noticed is that there are a number of organizations, HSGP, for example, who has launched a series of lectures that involve only white people. And they involve the white people examining what is the history of this? What can we learn that we have essentially been shielded from, so that to give us a better understanding of what the grievances are of our Black citizens. I think they're probably obvious to many people in this community, because I think most people who have the benefit of some education have at least been exposed to some of this stuff. So there's lots of ways that we can use this tool. And as a board now, we're going to be examining some of those possibilities so that we can appeal to a broader spectrum, if you will, of the community. And of course, it all comes at the same time that in the Supreme Court and in our national politics, the evangelical community has launched a number of initiatives and court cases that are seeking to perpetuate and aggravate the discrimination that they have, in essence, many of them have been defending. And unfortunately, the composition of the court is going to have that battle be prolonged. But there's many other things that can be done and that we, I think, need to saddle up and start doing. So I've spoken for quite some time. Let me just make one more quick message. The start that we've made today is indeed just that. It's a start. We are going to be sending all of you, and even beyond the people here and the membership, we're going to be reaching beyond to the people who have communicated with Freethought Arizona over the last few years through social media, Facebook, and what have you, to inquire as to what they want to see by way of programming. What kind of things would cause them to invest an hour and a half or 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon to listen in. So we hope to get some feedback from that to inform our programming going forward. But in the beginning, we're going to salute our long-term membership and give them what they've been getting in the past, albeit in this new format. And I ask all of you to please stay with us, tell your friends, encourage them to join us, and suggest things that we might present that will pique their interest and will make them, in essence, become active members. We need you, and we have opportunities like no other in our recent past to be able to affect the kind of changes that we've all been hoping for. So, Oliver, I think most of them are still awake, although most of them are blushing, so I can't tell. If you have questions,
we do have a question in the chat from Howard. Can the secular studies programs at the Capitol be Zoomcast and/or recorded for future viewing?
The short answer is no. The Capitol programs will not. Now, what we can do, now I should mention, Howard, that those programs are actually pretty abbreviated. The objective there is to elicit discussion among the legislators. And honestly, they are extremely grateful for that opportunity. However, we can take those same programs and get them a much more expanded version of them and have those speakers present to this group or on the Secular AZ webcast. And what we're going to do, by the way, we're going to put together a directory that every week communicates to all our members across the state, including those in our 22 organizations, affiliated organizations, so that they know what the offering is and they can all tune into that. Any other questions?
There is another one in the chat from Connie. She says, most of the organizations mentioned in the talk are based in Phoenix. Are there chapters specifically based in Tucson?
There's the cat.
So, well, I can give a reply because I'm in Tucson if you'd like.
Yeah, let me respond to that real quickly. We consider all our affiliated organizations, all our liaised organizations, to really be extensions of Secular AZ. Freethought Arizona will be presenting all the information that we have, and Kay Lehman, who is what we call our liaison, the person who is the communications link, has been very aggressive in sending out all that information to everybody. So yeah, we consider ourselves a part of a big family, and particularly now that I'm directly involved with Freethought, I can promise you that that will only increase.
Gail sent a message suggesting that people attend the Zoom meetings of Secular AZ, but that's something that you did just talk about combining the calendars so that everybody has access to everything.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, Kay and I were both looking at that what they call it, near space exploration or something. That's actually a U of A program, I think. And it was very informative, and it was presented by Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. We've had, at Secular AZ, we've had stuff that we've produced that we've broadcast everywhere. So I want to make sure that the role that Secular AZ plays is of having all the program from all these organizations be available to everybody around the state, so that you can pick and choose. You can look at the directory and say, I want to link into that one today, and in you go. So that's the goal. Anybody else?
If anybody wants to unmute their mic and ask a question verbally, you're free to do that as well. It's not just chat.
I just want to say that the reason I put the thing up about Secular Arizona was that I learned a lot about what's going on in our legislature by listening to where they handed out the stars. And people that did not go to that missed out on knowing what these folks are really doing and what legislators are really working for us. So I encourage you to get involved.
Well, certainly not everyone is all that interested in political activism. I personally am, and so my involvement with ACLU and with Secular Coalition and helping hire a lobbyist and so on are all testimony to that. But there's people who are more interested in socializing and more interested in cultural things and so on and so forth. Secular Coalition and the secular communities wants to encourage that across the board, so that you can essentially pick and choose the organization that best fits your interests. And if there's a local place to get involved with them, you can do that. I know that in Tucson we have, I think, a total of now 4 or 5 organizations that are members of Secular AZ. The Arizona End of Life Options Group has just joined the coalition. The Tucson Atheist Community Outreach Group, which is a humanist kind of group. The Tucson Atheists, Freethought, and then there's a Jewish circle that's also part of coalition. These are all Tucson groups that form part of our coalition. So, and we're always looking for more, as long as they support the secular public policy program. That's what it takes. Any questions?
I missed the first part of the meeting because I couldn't get on, but now I'm here. My interest has always been in the separation of church and state. I'm a retired high school principal, and I've always been interested in keeping religion out of the classroom. The reason I support and am a member of Secular Coalition of Arizona is because of the excellent work that Tori, and of course supported by the whole organization, does in their legislature. But I'm also more interested in the humanism kinds of activities that we might find on these Zoom presentations. I'm less interested in the legislative activity except just to know that things are going well. And I trust SCA to do all that. But I would like to find some more discussion kind of activities that would involve humanism and the goodness of humanisms without being for or against religion. Is that possible?
Yes, let me just mention that I think it's August the 3rd, where the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, the Greater Phoenix chapter, I mentioned in your absence that Lyman, that I had been president of that until recently when I turned it over to Joe Blankenship, and Joe has put together a very aggressive program of education that he is enlisting the help of some of the interfaith movements in the Phoenix area and possibly in Tucson as well, and focusing exactly on what you're talking about. And he will be presenting his program on August 3rd, I believe, on the Secular AZ produced program.
Thank you.
And there'll be more. There'll be plenty more.
And also the program that Wei is going to be doing in September is about is based on humanism. So that's going to be really interesting. So that's September 13th.
I'm looking forward to that one, and thank you, Wei, for accommodating us as we scrambled to try to cope with this imposition that this virus is put on all of us. But I appreciate you your forbearance and your support. You're muted if you were going to respond to what I said, Wei. So if you would unmute yourself, we would like to hear what you have to say.
I hope I will make a reasonably interesting presentation. Not all that many people are interested in ancient Chinese philosophy, but I'm going to trace the humanist perspectives from ancient philosophers. And I will say this much in anticipation of my presentation, and that is philosophy occupies a place in Chinese civilization that's comparable to that of religion in many other cultures. In other words, China, the Chinese people kind of go to aspects of philosophy when they are presented with moral dilemmas or issues like that. All kinds of religions have come into China in the last 2,000 years or so, and Chinese produced one native religion, but that Taoist religion is usually more of those who are less educated. Those who are educated just would go to philosophy. But the philosophical ideas really have percolated down throughout the society. And that's what I'm going to talk about. Thank you for your interest.
Well, we are interested. I certainly am interested. And obviously philosophy is pretty much everywhere. One of the things I am interested in learning a little bit more about Wei is how those traditions have survived the last 50, 60 years of Chinese history. It's been turbulent, and of course, a lot of it has been officially atheistic, and yet I think they have survived, and that's one of the things I have a particular interest in.
Yeah, actually, Confucian ideas have been criticized in China since at least 1919. So for over a century now, Confucian ideas have been subject to a lot of scrutiny and critique. At periods under communist rule, yes, he was more attacked. But even before that, the Chinese people thought there was really some problems with Confucian ideas, and there have been critique. Personally, as a child of China of the 20th century, I did not like Confucius for many, many years. I held him responsible for all kinds of problems in Chinese history and Chinese culture. But as I read his own sayings, it's very different from the ideology that developed in China in the last 2,000 years or so, which has been used and is probably still used as a measure of social control for those who have less power, like the women, like the poor, and so on.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Wei. Like I said, I'm looking forward to your presentation on that topic, as I'm sure most of our viewers here were also going to be in attendance. You will essentially be the first real speaker. I kind of snuck in on this one just on account of my recent elevation here to the board and the leadership. Any other questions?
I don't see any more questions in the
Okay.
chat, other than one that I answered. Somebody asked where and how to attend Wei's presentation. It's and the details aren't posted yet, but they will be soon on Meetup and Facebook and everything. And Debbie posted a link to an SSA virtual conference that is going on in almost 2 weeks.
Could I just respond a little bit to what Zenaido was saying? I kind of knew that what Secular AZ was doing in terms of lobbying the legislature and also dealing with issues of separation of state and church. But I didn't realize until your presentation today that how unique it is in the whole country. I'm a member of the American Humanist Association. I kind of follow what they do in terms of what the Congress is doing and so forth. But I just want to, say wonderful, congratulations that Secular AZ is doing all of these things and for the last 10 years or so. And I'm just very impressed that you have 4 volunteers, lawyer volunteers, and that's just fantastic, I think. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Wei. Actually, those 4 lawyers are the ones that are on our board. Diane Post, our legal director, actually has another half a dozen or so off-board members who help us from time to time pro bono on some of the law firms around Phoenix. But she's developed excellent relationships with the national organizations of AHA and FFRF and AU and others to bring in their expertise whenever, in essence, we run into some real litigation possibilities. So that's one of the reasons I've kept those relationships alive. We need those people. But thank you for your kind words. We are indeed unique, sadly so. 5 years ago, I offered to work with Secular Coalition for America to replicate what we have here in 5 other locations. And I went as far as to put together a syllabus and do all kinds of stuff, but the last minute they backed off, particularly after the election when they decided that they would have to use all their resources at the national level, the Secular Coalition for America at the national level, rather than spread it into chapters. As a consequence, all their chapters have dried up. There's no Secular Coalition chapter anywhere in the country. We are an affiliate. We've done it all on our own. And honestly, we could not have done it without the support of people like the membership of Freethought Arizona, Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix, and others around the state. So really, you are the ones that have made all this possible, and we can't do it without you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? Are we?
If I may, I just registered.
Yeah, Howard.
Thank you. I just registered for the Secular Student Alliance Conference, which I didn't know about till Debbie posted the link. It's kind of an amazing looking event over 4 days. And I think one of the advantages of doing it virtually is that expense is very minimal. So you could pick and choose workshops. It looks like registration is free, and so I encourage everyone to click that link and check it out. And thanks to Debbie for putting that in the chat. And that's what this type of networking is all about, because certainly, as I said, I, for one, would have not had any idea unless I heard about it elsewhere, that this was scheduled over 4 days from the 22nd to the 25th of July.
Thank you, Howard. Yeah, indeed, that's a benefit of this type of link. As you mentioned, the cost is minimal, and the geography is
Unlimited.
not important. You can do it from anywhere. Okay. Well, thank you all once again for being part of this inaugural launch of our virtual meetings. And please be on the lookout for our correspondence going forward. I hope to see you at the next one. And Wei hopes to see you in the next one, because I'm sure she's got a substantial amount of information and wisdom to deliver to all of us.
Thank you.
So Waze isn't the next one. There we have one in August, and then
I'm
Waze
sorry.
in September. But
Who's this the next one?
His name is Dr. Ravi Grivois Shah. He's a doctor that's going to talk about the TUSD sex education issues.
Okay.
And that's on August 9th. And then Waze will be on September 13th.
Okay. Well, thank you. My apologies. Well, yeah, I know that there's a lot of people. Tori mentioned that, by the way, at the Secular Coalition meeting, Secular AZ meeting, board meeting yesterday, and she was very interested in that. Sex education is one of the things that she's got a specific interest in. I think her kids are about that age where she's beginning to have those concerns.
Thank you.
So anybody want to know anything else? Anybody want to know about my criminal background or anything?
Statute of limitation is run out. You're too old.
Yeah, that's true. I can remember there is a blot on my past, though, Grover, that I probably ought to fess up to. When I was, I think it was in high school, I was a freshman in high school, I went into Montgomery wards, if you can remember those. My family was not financially too well off, and I didn't have a costume for Halloween. And I went into that store, and there was this incredible red wig on a mannequin. And I thought I could put it on my head and somehow not attract attention leaving the store with it. And I was collared.
Oh my.
So
Watch out for red wigs.
Yeah.
it cut my life of crime short. It stopped in its tracks. I thought, man, I can't make it in this field.
You were caught red-headed.
Very good.
Ooh.
No offense to redheads. Yeah.
Okay, well, how do you close these out, Kay? I'm not familiar with.
You just go down to the well. Oh, you mean as far as closing out the meeting? Well, I think
Yeah.
I think we've
with an inspirational message or something.
oh my. Well,
Trump is a wimp.
I think we can. We'll look forward to our next meeting, and we're glad it's like we have a breath of fresh air today, I think, and so we're going to be get in on this Zoom train and do some interesting talk. And I think we're going to have we do have some interesting people in the works to bring up to talk, and I think you're going to enjoy some of the programming we have. So. And we'll look forward to our next meeting on August 9th.
Yep. We'll look forward to hearing poll results. We'll get that sent out in the next day or two as well.
Yeah, do let us know what you think. That's important.
Oh yeah, we're sending out a survey, and we'll ask you to let us know what you want from us, what you're interested in from us. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, and so you just click on the leave button.
Yeah.